Why I almost stopped reading comic books.
Forever.
Guys, I'm Mike Spider Slayer. Welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. If you love daily comic book content and you like me helping you make decisions of what comic books to buy, you came to the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. So welcome back to my little summer mini series here that I'm doing. This is day 5 as I tackle certain topics and a little bit of my history of collecting comic books. And today we're going to be talking about why I did almost stop reading comic books. Now, this has to do with independent comic books because earlier I showed you a video, and you haven't seen that, I'll leave it at the end of this one, where there was an independent series that made me change my thought process on independent comic books. But before that, back in the day, there were some independent comics that were absolute stinkers. So we're going to talk about it. So back in the day when Marvel was out, I would say in the early 90s, like 1990, right? 1989, 1988. What did we have? We had Todd McFarlane taking on the Spider-Man book. We had Jim Lee, who was doing freaking X-Men comics. You had Rob Liefeld, who is doing New Mutants and X-Force. You got all those different types of people out there. Eric Larson took over Spider-Man, right? So you had all these different guys that were doing things, and they were producing some of the best comic books that we have ever seen. And all of them were basically artists. So obviously, we've seen the biggest sales ever when it came to Spider-Man, when it came to X-Men. And these guys weren't getting the money that they deserved or the recognition that they deserved, right? So as the speculation market grew for comic books, well, these guys felt we need to capitalize on this. And so we wind up getting Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Mark Silvestri, Willis Portasano. They created Image Comics. We all know this story by now, right? And there you have where Image was born, where their creations are their creations. They get credit for what they do, right? So because these guys thought they were great artists, they thought they could put out the best stories on top of it. So when you have the release of all these books that they were going to be released and the people knew these names, then what happens is people were like all excited about it. Oh my gosh, this is brand new number ones. This is going to be worth a ton of money. This and that and this and that. And people were all excited, right? So when Image was launched back in 1992, this is what they came out with. Youngblood, issue 1. This is from Rob Liefeld. He did his Extreme Studios imprint. You had Spawn, issue 1 in May of 92 from Todd McFarlane Productions. You had Wildcats, issue 1 in August of 1992 from Jim Lee Wildstorm Productions. You had Savage Dragon, July of 1992, from Eric Larson, which still goes on today, and same with Spawn. And you have Shadowhawk, issue 1, 1992, from Jim Valentino. And then we have Cyberforce, issue 1, from 1992, from Mark Silvestri's Top Cow Productions. Okay? So, when you look at all of these comic books, which ones are still out today? And which ones are still very good? Well, I would say that probably the only book that has somewhat of a following is going to be really Spawn, and then maybe Savage Dragon. I think Savage Dragon's cult following, I'm the only one that I know, and a few other of my webheads out there actually read Savage Dragon, okay? So, big crowds show up, people get these new number ones, they read these books with this crazy dynamic artwork, and the stories suck absolute ass. They are not good at all. You know, you get that great artwork, but if you can't do that character development, no one's going to read your story, right? And that is why a lot of people dropped off of Image Comics in the beginning, because a lot of these stories, you know, they were released, they were delayed, the stories weren't very good, they weren't X-Men, they weren't Spider-Man, they weren't this and they weren't that. So it was a lot of disappointment. They were overprinted, they're not worth anything, and you can find them in dollar bins today, right? So there's a frustration right there when it came to Image comic books for me. I didn't like any of those books. I didn't buy Savage Dragon until later on, right? So I didn't buy them. I didn't like them. They were a disappointment. And there went my thought process on the independent Image comic book, okay? Then you go back to Marvel Comics, and well, since all you had is your heavy hitters that, you know, were making comics, there wasn't that many of the hot new talent around anymore. And so you wind up getting Marvel Comics starting to falter and fail, and the comic speculation market absolutely sucked. And then there's more gimmicks and things like that, and the stories just weren't that good anymore, and it wasn't so dynamic with the artwork. It just was kind of a lackluster, right? And so because of Image Comics, I felt like, you know what, I don't want to read these, and Marvel's not quite as good, and I fell out of comic books. Now, back when they were launched Heroes Reborn, I read a few of those, and I didn't like that either. I didn't think that was good. So back in like 1997 or whatever it is, I dropped it again. And it wasn't until another 10 years later, until that 2007, like we talked about in earlier videos, is when I started getting back into comic collecting, right? With Civil War and Spider-Man, The Walking Dead, which again changed my perspective on comic book collecting when it came to the independent stories, right? So when you look at Image Comics today, you still have all those founders, a lot of those founders in there. Obviously, Jim Lee is in DC, right? But Eric Larson's still there. You got Robert Kirkman there now. You got Todd McFarlane in charge, right? But you look at Image today, and it's a much different story. And again, I thank probably Robert Kirkman for changing the Image scene, right? I think their books are really a lot more better, are a lot improved, and yeah, and that's what it was for me, right? So I want to know in the comments below, old guys like me, were you around in those early 90s days when Image Comics was launched? Did you wait in that line to go get Youngblood issue 1, Spawn issue 1, Wildcats issue 1, Savage Dragon, Shadowhawk, and Cyberforce? These guys were huge, right? So, and were you disappointed like me? And did you quit comics because of it? Let me know all those thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, another trip down memory lane when it came to me collecting and talking about comic books. So guys, I'll leave you more of the content right here from this week. And of course, guys, support the local comic shops. Keep buying, keep collecting, but always remember, read your comic books so we can have great comic conversation. Guys, thank you so much for watching.